The push to abolish property taxes in Ohio. Ahead on Face the State, you could get a chance to decide if that actually happens. The group working to put a constitutional amendment on the November ballot says they're getting closer to the number of signatures needed. Why they say ending property taxes is necessary, and why a coalition opposing the measure says it will come at a steep cost. A representative joins me in studio.
When the fire department got there, they couldn't find places to put the hoses. Initially, the prisoners were cutting the lines.
The deadliest prison fire in U.S. history happened right here in Columbus, killing more than 300 inmates. We're looking back nearly 100 years at what happened and what came out of it. Plus,
if you've been doing it for 18 years, you know I love it.
Dedicated to democracy, this Franklin County poll worker has been helping voters cast their ballots for nearly 40 elections. What keeps her going and why she loves it. Face the State starts now. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. We start with the latest on the effort to abolish property taxes in Ohio. The grassroots group Committee to Abolish Ohio's Property Taxes, or Axe Ohio Tax, has been working to put a proposed constitutional amendment on the November ballot. The committee says it is on pace to gather enough signatures to make that happen. Organizers say 305,000 voters have signed the amendment petition to place it on the November ballot. They need more than 413,000 valid signatures by July 1st. They argue people are being taxed out of their homes, young people can't afford to buy a home, and politicians aren't doing enough to fix the problem. Committee member Brian Massey had this to say at the announcement, which he made while sitting in a replica Oval Office in Northeast Ohio.
Private property ownership is the foundation of freedom and liberty for all Ohioans. We no longer want to be just renters from the government. Home ownership in Ohio is merely an illusion. Any tax causing a citizen to become homeless is immoral.
Massey also read and signed symbolically what the group is calling a new Declaration of Independence for all Ohioans. It includes the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and private property ownership. Here's Massey with more of the committee's arguments for the proposed amendment to abolish property taxes.
We have come to realize that the property tax issue is more than a dollar and cent issue. Private property ownership is the foundation of freedom and liberty. It allows families to get out of poverty by allowing the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next. Without the right of private property ownership, we are merely serfs to the government. As our elected officials have refused to protect our inalienable property rights, we, the people of the great state of Ohio, are left with no alternative but to ourselves secure freedom and liberty for this and future generations by abolishing Ohio's immoral property taxes. Is it the role of government to be in the business of property valuation? We have third-party appraisers being paid by the taxpayers' money. They control the destiny of the taxpayers with their property valuation system, but they're not accountable to the taxpayers. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit that's what the Boston Tea Party was in 1773. There's nothing new. By getting the government out of the business of property valuation, we may discover that we do not need an auditor and a treasurer in every county. We're going to have to start a Doge throughout the state of Ohio to determine how we can actually reduce the size of our government.
Now, the committee must submit the signatures to the Secretary of State's office by July 1st. They have a goal of collecting 620,000 to give themselves a buffer to meet that 413,000 goal in case that there are some that are thrown out. Meantime, a statewide coalition just launched a public education campaign opposing this amendment. Ohioans to Protect Public Services says this amendment would devastate public services and schools if passed and lead to very high sales and income taxes to replace the lost property tax revenue. State leaders say property taxes bring in $24 billion a year. Joining me now is Ohioans to Protect Public Services spokesperson and advisor, Kurt Steiner. Kurt, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, Doug. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, just who makes up the coalition?
Well, we have 65 members from all over the state that are very broad-based organizations, and from unions to businesses to local government groups to school groups to groups that represent the parks and libraries, people with disabilities, disabled, developmentally disabled people, children's services, senior citizens, a very broad base.
How did it all come together?
It all came together because of this amendment that's being proposed and the idea behind it. And the idea behind it is to eliminate, abolish all property taxes, all of which are supporting local services. Every dollar in property taxes goes to local services. It doesn't go to the state of Ohio at all. And to get rid of all that revenue, which is 2/3 of the support for local services of all kinds, is just a near impossibility. And if it were done, it would require huge increases in income taxes, sales taxes, or massive cuts in the kind of services that we use all the time.
Why start the education campaign now?
Well, because the idea has been in circulation for a long time, and many of these groups have been opposed to this concept of total abolishment of property taxes. But the idea of putting them all together is to be able to speak with one voice from a very broad base and make sure that the information we provided is credible and informative to everybody.
Do you understand the Committee to Abolish Ohio's Property Taxes frustration?
Absolutely. We all agree that something needs to be done with property taxes. The legislature has made some reforms. They're looking at more reforms. The system does need to be reformed. People are very frustrated with the rising property taxes, and they do want to see something done about it. But this is sort of like trying to figure out how to reduce electricity rates and like shutting off the power. That's not the way to do it.
Let's talk about townships in particular. It's kind of it's a unique form of municipal government. So how much would it impact a township if the property taxes were eliminated?
Well, there are 4.5 million Ohioans that live in townships. And of course, we all drive through townships all the time.
Right.
They rely almost exclusively on property taxes to pay for everything that they do, including maintaining their local roads, and then all their police, fire, EMS, 911, all of that is paid for with property taxes.
And I heard this like 97% of funding or something like
Absolutely.
that for townships.
It's almost all of it. They do get some gas tax money for some of their roads. And they get maybe some local government funds from the state. But bottom line is almost everything that they do is paid for by their locally voted property taxes.
You also make the argument that the lost revenue would have to be made up somewhere. So it would be shifted in some way. And that would most likely be through sales and income taxes. Does your group have an estimate on how much that might increase in order to make up the difference?
Absolutely. It looks like, and again, we based that information on information that came from the State Office of Budget and Management, but you're looking at a sales tax increase that maybe triple what it is now, so up toward 20%. Looking at an income tax increase, 15, 16%. We would have the highest sales and the highest income taxes in the country if the state was being asked to bail this out.
Now, the Committee to Abolish Ohio's Property Taxes argue that Ohio doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem, and that it would be up to lawmakers to cut the size of the government. You heard Brian Massey say that. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because Mr. Massey and others complain about the growth in state spending, but then they take direct aim at local property taxes and local spending. So it really doesn't even address state spending in any way. So it's like they have a target, but they don't even shoot at the target they're talking about.
And I guess, do you, like he even brings this up, that they're criticized that they don't have a plan to replace what they're talking about. He says that's up to lawmakers. Mm-hmm. Does your coalition have ideas? Are you putting forth anything, or is it just
well, the only
back on
concept
this?
that's on the table is this concept, which stops at just eliminating all property taxes. So the main thing that we are doing is just explaining what would happen if all property taxes, which is 2/3 of the support of all local services from police and fire protection, EMS and schools and other services, would go away.
But you mentioned you also support more reform.
Absolutely, we do support more reform, and we're watching closely what the General Assembly's looking at doing, and to me it looks like they will do more.
I was going to ask if you expect more, because they came up with.
I can't speak for the General Assembly.
Sure,
I
no,
want you to know that. But it looks to me like they're thinking about doing some more things.
Led by Representative David Thomas,
Right.
They did pass a series of 5 bills that they say will save property owners more than $3 billion over the next 3 years.
Yes.
Does that give you some, is that moving in the right direction for you, and do you think more needs to be done?
I think it's absolutely the right direction. And they've tried, one of the things that they've done that some of the groups aren't crazy about, but they've done it, is deal with property values. So as property values go up, your property taxes would also go up. But what they've done is they've said that in the future, property taxes that are unvoted can only go up by the inflation rate, not by the valuation rate. So somebody could have a 10% increase in their home value, but let's say over that period of time inflation was only 2%, that's all the higher their property taxes could go. So that's a really significant reform. That was one of the reasons why property taxes went up. There were also some trap doors that were in the system that were causing some people to have this very unusual spiking. And Representative Thomas and others have dealt with that, and those kind of spiking for those kind of reasons, for those complicated trapdoors, have been eliminated.
The whole tax system is very
It
complicated.
is very, and it's hard for people to understand, and it's understandably hard to understand.
Well, Kurt, thank you so much for your time and your perspective on the other side of the proposed constitutional amendment to abolish property taxes. If you'd like more information, you can go to your website now, and that again is Ohioans to Protect Public Services. Kurt, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, coming up on Face the State, 96 years ago this past week, the deadliest prison fire in U.S. history. How did the fire at the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus start? Why did more than 300 inmates die? And what is the lasting fallout of the fire? We dive into the archives for the answers. Plus, a Republican candidate for governor is now out of the race with just over a week to go before the primary. Why Heather Hill is no longer eligible to receive votes, but she vows to keep fighting. A major shakeup in the race for Ohio governor. Republican candidate Heather Hill is no longer eligible to receive votes ahead of the May 5th primary. The Ohio Secretary of State's office announced on social media that Hill's running mate, Stuart Moats, withdrew his candidacy for the office of lieutenant governor. The Secretary of State says without a valid lieutenant governor candidate, Heather Hill no longer qualifies to receive votes for the office of governor. Hill released a statement Wednesday saying, quote, "As you know, my ex-lieutenant governor filed paperwork to have himself removed from my ballot today. He believed by doing this, it would remove me from the ballot and keep me from winning the May primary. We will continue to fight. We will continue to stand. And when we meet opposition, we do not fold, we do not coward or go away." Moats posted a pair of videos on social media confirming he had submitted paperwork intended to end Hill's campaign. We reached out to him for comment. We have not heard back as of the taping of Face the State. The Secretary of State's office says Ohio's 88 county boards of elections have been notified that any votes for Hill and Moats will not be counted, and each board must also provide notice to voters. That leaves Vivek Ramaswamy and Casey Putsch as the only two Republican candidates left on the primary ballot for governor. Amy Acton is the lone Democrat running. And there's one more week of early voting ahead of the May 5th primary, and the hours are extended at your county board of elections office. Here are those hours for you. The Monday through Friday hours go until at least 7:30 p.m. There are also Saturday and Sunday hours next weekend, not today. No early voting will be held on Monday the 4th as election workers get ready for the Tuesday election. It's also important to note this Tuesday the 28th is the last day to request an absentee mail-in ballot.
One of the important things that's different this election cycle is the grace period to return your ballot. Past elections, you had 4 days as long as it was postmarked the day before the election. The legislature changed that this year. There is no grace period. We need those ballots in our office by 7:30 p.m. on election night. So that is a big change.
And to vote, you will need one of these forms of ID: an Ohio driver's license, state of Ohio ID card, U.S. passport, U.S. military ID, or Veterans Affairs ID. At the State House, a state representative introduced a bill to legalize medical aid in dying. It would allow certain terminally ill, mentally competent adults to choose to end their life by a doctor prescribing a lethal dose of a drug. Representative Eric Sinnenberg says the legislation aims to provide compassionate end-of-life options for Ohioans facing terminal illness. One advocate says this option would have helped his wife.
She had said her goodbyes to her family and friends, but dreaded what was to come. She wished for a way to end her suffering on her terms, sparing herself the pain and her family the trauma of watching her slowly fade away. She did not have that option.
The legislation includes safeguards, including waiting periods, mental health evaluations, multiple requests, and the patient must be evaluated by at least 2 doctors. Medical aid in dying is already legal in 9 states and D.C. Nearly 100 years ago, the deadliest prison fire in U.S. history happened right here in Columbus. The former Ohio State Penitentiary stood where Nationwide Arena is today. More than 300 prisoners died on April 21, 1930. Investigators determined the fire was set on purpose as part of a prison escape. We do want to warn you, some of the images you're about to see in this story may be graphic for you. As 10 TV's Kevin Landers shows us, the tragedy changed fire protection codes inside prisons across the United States.
Easter Monday, 1930.
It was known across the nation and around the world.
Fire rips through the roof of the Ohio State Penitentiary.
Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
The prison was one of the largest in the nation. By comparison, it held a third of the inmates in the entire federal system.
This is one of the most overcrowded prisons in the country at that time. You know, you got 4,500 prisoners made for in a prison made for 1,500.
Mitchell Roth, a professor of criminal justice, is the author of the 2019 book Fire in the Big House. It examined the chaos in what he described as a cascade of failures inside the prison walls.
When the fire department got there, they couldn't find places to put the hoses. Initially, the prisoners were cutting the lines.
As smoke filled the cell blocks, hundreds of men were trapped behind steel bars. Records show 322 inmates suffocated, locked in their cells with no way out.
It was the worst prison disaster in the world until Honduras beat it a few years ago.
We examined hundreds of pages of microfiche documents. A state inquiry found guards didn't have keys to open cells. A supervisor refused to unlock doors fearing a mass escape. There was no advanced fire response plan. The prison relied entirely on the Columbus Fire Department. Guards testified no one took command. Prisoners were heard screaming, "Open the doors, open the doors." Warden Preston Thomas never lost his job or was disciplined.
He was vilified, through, the entire process after the transcripts were released, the trial and everything else. And I think, he deserved the blame that he got, but it was systemic. He didn't take a lot of responsibility for what happened.
Nearly a century later, the cause of the fire remains in dispute. After 3 investigations, the state concluded 3 inmates, James Raymond, Clinton Great, and Hugh Gibbons, started the fire as part of a diversion for a prison escape. The inmates confessed to placing a lit candle in a tin of paraffin oil near oily rags where construction crews were building a new roof. Raymond and Great were convicted. Both died by hanging in their cells, which many believe was a sign of their guilt. Gibbons was also convicted and received a life sentence for second-degree murder. I'm standing on what was once the prison grounds. Not everyone believed the inmates' confession. Public sentiment and news reports at the time believed their confessions were coerced. Others believed the cause of the fire was faulty wiring. But some believe the arson story was a way to blame prisoners and deflect from the real problem, prison overcrowding.
Now, it wasn't an accident. It was part of an escape plan.
Nearly a century since the fire.
The real tragedy, too, is how Columbus has forgotten this story.
Nothing from the prison exists. A wrecking ball delivered the Ohio Penn's last rites in the late 1990s. Today, in a park few know exists, is where you'll find the only mention of the worst prison fire in U.S. history.
As far as I know, there's no memorials for the prisoners that died.
These two plaques where the old Penn stood on Spring Street contain just 36 words about the fatal fire. No historical state marker exists. Nothing to explain how the fire changed the nation's prison fire codes, created fireproof bedding in prisons, mandated fire sprinkler systems, promoted the use of remote release mechanisms to open cell doors in case of an emergency, along with efforts to reduce prison overcrowding. From these ashes also came the creation of the Ohio Parole Board.
You think there should be a memorial? Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, what is the argument against it? I mean, it's to understand Columbus, to understand the criminal justice system, to understand the evolution of the prison system and all of that. I think this is an important starting point.
Why isn't there a state historical marker? Apparently, no one has applied for it. We contacted the Ohio Parole Board about our story to see if they would consider it. We have not heard back. Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
Still ahead on Face the State.
So if you don't vote, don't complain. That's the best thing I can say.
We all hear how important it is to vote. Next, meet a woman who practices what she preaches, making sure every vote counts, election after election after election. As I mentioned earlier, there's 1 week left of early voting for the May 5th primary. And when people cast their ballots, they want to know their vote counts. Well, for a long time now at the Franklin County Board of Elections, there's one poll worker they can definitely count on.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
With a sunny disposition
We'll have her sit, so she can sit. You can stand by her, is that okay?
Yeah.
and an infectious laugh,
When it says I voted. How about that? She'll help you right there.
Joan Johnston has helped thousands of voters with one-on-one attention.
And then you go right out the door. We'll just shove you right out.
One election at a time.
I've been doing this, this is 18 years.
38 straight elections.
2008 was Obama.
She loves it.
If you've been doing it for 18 years, you know I love it.
For the people
Working with my coworkers, love each and every one of them.
and the process.
So if you don't vote, don't complain. That's the best thing I can say.
She's a rock star.
Franklin County Board of Elections spokesperson Aaron Sellers has been here for all 38 elections Joan has worked.
You can be tired, but when you see her, it puts a smile on your face.
This is nice and bright.
Joan doesn't seem to be getting tired.
I'll be 89, Cinco de Mayo.
May 5th, appropriately, Election Day.
Is it okay if I tell people?
I'm proud of it. There you go, now pull it out. Go ahead, pull it out.
On certain important Tuesdays, she promises,
To be right here.
and for many more early voting Mondays through Fridays.
As long as I'm healthy and able, I'll do as many as I can.
Making sure every vote counts.
Okay, this is your ballot. You have a blessed and favored day. Thank you, you too. Thank you.
And get this, Joan also knows sign language, so she is able to help hearing impaired voters when they come to cast their ballots. Thank you so much for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. Have a great day.